And a few months ago, Time magazine had a hard copy special issue in the newsstands, Mindfulness, the New Science of Health and Happiness. Basically, talking about a lot of, New Age type medicine, sometimes called alternative medicine, sometimes naturopathic, sometimes holistic. This was actually a $14 magazine that will lead many down a strange path to spiritual danger. Now, CNN Time poll states that 30 to 40% of the U.S. population has tried some form of unconventional therapy, and that means many of you listeners have. I have. And the chronically ill will try most anything. So this is now a $30 billion industry designed to help people, replace the drug industry and perhaps the resulting side effects of drugs, etc. But what do we do with practices that say they want to treat body, mind, and spirit? What do we do when practitioners say our problems are the result of misalignment of the natural energy within? What do we do when we are offered questionable and indeed spiritually harmful remedies, such as yoga, Reiki, meditation, crystals, kinesiology, iridology, hypnosis, or the techniques of a Deepak Chopra, a Dr. Oz, or an Eckhart Tolle? Are herbal medicines worth the big investment? We're going to discuss this most of the hour, and we believe we're going to discuss what could affect your spiritual health, not just your physical health. My two frequent co-hosts are kind of my co-guests again this week. I have in studio with me Jill Martin Rishi, and by the way, she is the author of the outstanding encyclopedia, The Kingdom of the Occult. Jill, I'm glad you could stop in.
Good to be here, Jan.
And Eric Barger, and of course I often talk about his book found at ericbarger.com, Entertaining Spirits Unaware. Thank you, Eric, for being here today.
Thanks, Jan.
Okay, here's a question, and I consider both of you experts on this particular topic, but at one time, hundreds of years ago, even thousands of years ago, mankind had to resort to some kind of natural remedy. Obviously, modern medicine didn't even exist 100 years ago. So folks got their medicine from plants and other things. Why was it not dangerous back then, but we're saying some of these treatments are dangerous today?
Well, here's the thing. I think we need to be careful in assessing these tools. God gave certain things. He gave flowers, He gave plants, He gave us animals, some of which have produced incredibly healing antitoxins. So if you look at what God made, I don't think you can label it all as bad and throw it away. When it becomes a problem is when you have things like Hinduism and other teachers of things that are not of God that weave their theology into these things and pervert them and take things that were good and twist them into something bad.
Jan, I concur with Jill, too, that there are lots of things from nature that are healing, but it is when the spiritual gets introduced, especially when you get the occult spiritual introduced,
Yes,
that things go haywire.
My understanding is, hospitals have integrated much of this now. For instance, a Christian nurse or doctor might not even be allowed to pray, a biblical prayer, and yet some patients wake up and somebody's waving their hands over them, likely practicing Reiki on them. So, this is how far we've slipped, right?
Right. And a lot of nurses, for example, are really forced into taking continuing education that has many of these elements attached to it. Some doctors, I'm sure, in some settings as well. And many of them they're open to it and say, oh, this is a new way to heal. I think we need to look at these things. Everything like this should be looked at under the microscope of the scriptures.
It's important to ask then, as we sort of set the stage here, is there any kind of theology behind a practice? Is there any kind of Eastern theology, even Chinese theology, ancient perhaps, that would be behind a certain technique? And if so, beware, buyer beware?
Yes, a lot of it is related to Hinduism, and it's focused on energy. You will
Yeah.
hear that term a lot
Yep.
when you're talking about this type of healing. For example, healing touch in hospitals. There will be people coming into the room and laying hands on you and doing things over your body or to your body. And they are linked or based in Hindu theology. And that has to do with the energy that runs through the chakras or energy points of your body. Same thing you run into in yoga, Jan, where they're channeling this energy in order to heal. That is not something that God has anything to do with. And anytime you explore an alternative healing method, you need to look for the theology that is behind that healing method and who is practicing it.
Exactly. There's another element to it, too, in the fact that if someone's desperate, maybe not even desperate, if somebody just is looking for a particular problem to be healed, if something works, they accept it. Just because something works doesn't make it biblical nor make it right, and the end may be worse than the problem you're dealing with today if you're not careful, and that's why we need to put all these things to the biblical test.
Exactly. And if we learn anything from the scripture, it's that Satan counterfeits. What is there to counterfeit? There's good to counterfeit what God gave. He counterfeits that. And you see that in healing done with these types of methodologies.
Okay, well, we would call a lot of the practices, and we're going to discuss some of them here throughout the hour. We would call it New Age medicine. And again, it goes by other terms, holistic, naturopathic, alternative. But I just typed in at Amazon.com, I typed in New Age medicine. And 43,000 options came up. 43,000, most of them books. Perhaps some are DVDs, instruction manuals. Let me just read a few. The New Age Herbalists, lots of Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra, Dr. Oz. Mind Over Medicine was a book. Magical Aromatherapy, The Power of Scent. This is published by Llewellyn. Llewellyn's New Age series. Let me just quickly say Llewellyn is the most prominent occult New Age publishing house. Once again, Minnesota can take the honor. It's the publishing house here in the Twin Cities. So they had lots and lots of items. Teach Yourself Crystal Healing, another item in the 43,000. Medicines for the New Age, from the Edgar Casey readings, information on beauty aids, herbs, and formulas. Another one, The Art of Spiritual Healing, Chakra and Energy Bodywork. Again, Llewellyn's New Age series. When you see Llewellyn, really have a check in you because it's blatant occult New Age publishing house. And then they had some books, including one by John Ankerberg, The Complete Guide to New Age Medicine and Its Threat to Your Family. John Ankerberg, a Christian, does an outstanding weekly television program exposing numbers of things. So I was glad to see there's an alternative that's warning against these. Again, 43,000 options on Amazon if you'd like to look into New Age medicine. Jill, that surprise you?
No, not at all. In fact, it would probably go on into the tens of thousands, if not higher. So yes, I mean, the occult we know is a very big business, produces very big business, and the New Age is woven into it because it is based largely in Hindu theology, and the Hindu theology draws on the power of multiple gods, which of course are not the God of the Bible. So yes, this power is real, and we know that Satan does have a limited amount of power to heal. So you will see things happen from this, but that does not mean it's of God. And that's where we have to be careful. Who's behind it? What is the theology? What are they teaching? What are they promising you? These are all things we as Christians, good stewards, need to explore.
I think another thing that we should bring up is, we're talking about the element of physical healing, but a lot of times emotional and mental, even spiritual healing is brought into this, directly into it. I'm looking at Oprah.com, an article by Dr. Oz, Does Past Life Regression Work? And this is dealing directly with bad memories or bad events that you think happened before. And of course, the idea is you go back not only in this life, but you go back into the last one you lived and the one before that and the one before that. And then reincarnation is introduced. And so people are looking for answers. There's no doubt about it. The problem is if you look in the wrong place, the answer that you get that you think might work and maybe does work may be the most deadly thing you ever did.
You're listening to Understanding the Times Radio. I'm Jan Markell. I have in studio with me Eric Barger and Jill Martin Rishi. Jill is the daughter of Dr. Walter Martin. You may have followed him some years ago. He passed away in 1989. And we are discussing New Age medicine because we believe that there's a spiritual component behind it, and the spiritual component is not a healthy one And we're going to look at, or at least very briefly, going to reference some of the practices that we consider troubling. I think other practices are perhaps more marginal, and others, quite frankly, are probably harmless, but it's sometimes hard to know just which category they fall into. But there's a rapidly growing number of people who claim, Jill and Eric, that it's possible to blend Christian and New Age by taking what strikes them as the best of both. The most obvious answer here, the most obvious category that fits into this would be yoga and then so-called Christian yoga. And let's just dwell, and again, this whole $14 magazine by Time, Mindfulness, the New Science of Health and Happiness, it's all meditation, it's all yoga, it's all ways you can learn to relax. I'm sure there's something in there that's probably legitimate and effective, but it's just wrapped in such terribly dangerous things. So yoga, in the Eastern world, yoga is an overtly spiritual practice connected to the worship of Hindu gods, as you've been saying, Jill. In the West, yoga is usually presented as a physical exercise or means to manage stress. If there's anything that characterizes the 21st century, it's stress upon stress upon stress. Obviously, this is one of the reasons this has come along and captivated the Western world, even though if you're going to embrace it, including Christian yoga, you're going to embrace millions of Hindu gods. Eric, would I be right there?
Absolutely. The Hindu yogis and the enthusiasts and those who teach it here in an Americanized form, if they really do understand, and I believe that people, certainly the Hindu yogis understand, but those in Christianity, I think, honestly, they have gone down a path and not realized what they've gotten into. Every one of the deep Hindu enthusiasts, the people who are following Hinduism, will tell you the Hinduism cannot be taken out of yoga. You can't do it. In fact, one of them said yoga and Hinduism are like two sides of the same coin. One doesn't exist without the other. And so we have to understand it from that angle. And people would say, but I'm just doing it for the exercise. I'm doing it for the stretching. They believe that they're getting the spirit power of Brahman by doing it. And that is, of course, one of the three main deities in Hinduism. And it goes on and on. You can read about this online. You can read what the yogis say. And in this case, I think we should listen to them. They say we're being disingenuous by trying to Christianize this thing.